Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Travel Tech Talk. If this is your first time here, then welcome to our channel. This channel is dedicated to providing helpful tips and tricks and assistance to help you elevate your travel videos to the next level. And if you're back again, then welcome back. It's great to see you. We hope you like the content on the channel, and if you do, please consider liking and subscribing. It's through your subscription that this channel can grow. So in this video today, we're going to be looking at the Canon M50 Mark II and speculating on what we think might be coming down the pipeline as regards to specifications for this long-awaited camera. So if you're an M50 fan, or if you're a Canon fan, or any other brand for that matter, and you're interested in understanding what might be coming to us in terms of the M50 Mark II, then stay tuned. In recent months, there's been a whole bunch of speculation going on, a whole bunch of wish lists of functionality that people would like to see in the Canon M50 Mark II. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at the latest specification that's been released by Canon Rumours, a really reliable source of information, either official or unofficial, coming out of Canon with regards to additions to the M range. And so over recent months, there's been a number of rumours that have been out on YouTube and around the media, speculating on what the Canon M50 Mark II specifications may well be. Canon Rumours, a great website, a repository for lots and lots of useful information with regards to upcoming tech, cameras, lenses and equipment, have been really useful and really quite effective in terms of flagging information that's coming out either officially or unofficially about specs for new pieces of tech. And in recent months, there's been a whole list of specifications that have been bounded around relative to the M50 Mark II. And I'm sure most viewers have thought about that and come up with their own wish list as to what they might like to see on the Canon M50 Mark II when it arrives. I certainly have my own wish list in terms of what I think about the M50 as it currently stands, and those areas where I think ultimately it could be improved in the Mark II. So Canon Rumours has been an excellent repository of information, both official and unofficial, relative to the M50. It's clear now that there will be another announcement made by Canon in the last quarter of 2020 with regards to an addition to its M range. Obviously there have been higher spec cameras that have been announced and released, you know, the M5 and the M6 Mark II in particular, that have been really useful additions to the Canon lineup. And so the M50 came out about 2 years ago to great fanfare, and it was an excellent entry camera in the mirrorless range. It obviously had an APS-C sensor, so a slightly smaller sensor, but it was a great camera with great specs. And it's been really embraced by the videography community. Vloggers and video creators alike have really engaged with this particular camera, and no doubt eagerly await the Mark II Canon M50 to see what Canon's going to do in terms of upgrading some of the specifications for the original M50. And of course, when the M50 actually came out to great fanfare, there was some really good capabilities and functionality that the camera brought in a really small footprint, in a really small body size. Yes, it came out with the 15 to 45mm zoom kit lens. It was obviously an IS and STM lens, so that was really useful in terms of getting great footage, but in essence it was a kit lens. Canon has been criticised somewhat for a lack of lenses in its M range, but notably there have been a few additional lenses that have come out recently, and ultimately other brands that have been issuing great lenses for the M range. And you know, when the M50 came out, it came out and had some great functionality. Of course, it could do 1080p, it had dual pixel autofocus. Yes, it had a smaller sensor, but that didn't give too much of a problem with regards to getting 1080 footage, you know, at 30, 25 and 24 frames per second. So that was great. It had superb color science, and as we've become used to with the Canon range of cameras. But it did come out with 4K, and ultimately there have been some disappointments with regards to the 4K. Clearly the dual pixel autofocus did not come with the 4K, so it relied on a contrast detection system that ultimately meant that the 4K on the M50 was not as useful as once it was perceived. And of course it had excellent functionality in terms of a screen, a fully articulated screen. Obviously had electronic viewfinder, given that it was a mirrorless camera. But there were some frustrations raised as a result of battery life wasn't that great. It had the EPL12 battery, which didn't really last as long as vloggers and videographers would have liked. Obviously no in-body image stabilization, IBIS, but one wouldn't expect to have IBIS in a camera of the body of that size. But on the 4K front, clearly there was a great disappointment relative to the fact that it did not have dual pixel autofocus at 4K. In addition, there was obviously some concerns relative to the frames per second, and videographers were looking for 120 frames per second at 1080p, and unfortunately that wasn't possible. The maximum it could go to was 60 frames per second. And then ultimately there were issues with regards to the audio not coming with that. And also of course it was had some limitations in terms of the physical size, and you know, with 4K it's already an APS-C sensor, so there is already a crop in comparison to a full frame equivalent camera. And of course at 4K there was an even further crop, so not only was there a 1.6 crop because it was an APS-C sensor, but when you went to 4K you also got an additional 1.6 crop, which ultimately meant a 2.56 crop. So at 15mm, which was the widest for the kit lens, ultimately you were filming somewhere around 38 to 40mm. So that wasn't good for videographers who really wanted to use that 4K and wanted to have the advantage of not only face detection but also the dual pixel autofocus. So it was a bit of a blow, and I'm sure Canon will do their best in the Mark II ultimately to do some upgrades and listen to the feedback that they got from the initial M50 purchasers. And so over the last few months there have been a number of wish lists that have come out on YouTube and around the community. You know, people asking, well, could there be a dual card slot? Could there be in-body image stabilization? Could there be an audio out plug? And could there be a bigger battery? I mean, there were lots of commentators asking for the LPE17 battery, which comes in the M6 Mark II. And I think we needed to be realistic in terms of what we could expect from the M50 Mark II. So Canon Rumours have come out with some more information which appears to be much more confirmed as opposed to just their CR1 rumour that has been generated somewhere from within the industry. And so the release of the M50 Mark II has been confirmed, and we can expect an announcement from Canon in the last quarter of 2020. The intention is to build on the great specification of the original Canon M50, and on Canon Rumours there is now a list. It is a rumoured list, but a list nevertheless of specifications that they think perhaps will come with the M50 Mark II. And so on that list are a 32.5 megapixel CMOS sensor. So that's really good in terms of it's an upgrade from the 24 megapixel sensor which is in the current M50, and also it's confirmed that the camera will be able to provide 4K at 60 frames per second without any crop at all. So that is going to tick the boxes of a lot of people that have currently got the current M50 or are looking to upgrade from one of the other cameras, or perhaps a point and shoot. So good news there in terms of 4K at 60 frames per second. So it's indicated that the camera will come with a new Digic X processor, perhaps a new processor that's been developed since the M50 was launched 2 years ago. Obviously it has the Digic 8 processor in there at the moment. And on the list as well is 14 frames per second. So in stills mode, in camera mode, 14 frames per second is really pretty decent for a camera of that size and at the price point. But also dual pixel autofocus 2, which is going to be a welcome addition. Ultimately is going to be able to make the footage on the camera in video mode excellent. It's going to work really well with lenses that have image stabilization and are STM lenses, which is great for even the kit lens and other lenses in the M range. And if you're liking this video content so far, why not consider liking and subscribing to our channel? It's through your subscription that this channel can grow. Thanks in advance. There appears to be no information at this moment in time in terms of whether Canon intends to change the battery or not. As I mentioned, it's got the LPE12 in it currently. The M6 Mark II has got the LPE17, and it's hoped that the E17 will come in the M50 as well, but nothing on that at the moment. It is confirmed though that there will not be in-body image stabilization, so no IBIS for the M50 Mark II. Clearly Canon want to differentiate that camera to the M6 Mark II and all of the bigger cameras that it has, so it seems sensible that Canon doesn't go down the road of making the body bigger. So is that, you know, indicative of the reason why there's going to be no IBIS in the Mark II? Is it indicative that there won't be a bigger battery, although it's still hoped, and I still hope, that there will be the LPE17 in there? Ultimately I think that will make for a much better quality of footage, and batteries lasting much longer is always a good thing, isn't it? And we're also told that there's going to be a similar EVF compared to the M5, which is really good, and also that there's going to be a single SD card. Lots of commentators were hoping that this camera might actually have a dual card slot. Canon are probably reserving that for some of the more expensive cameras in its line, and frankly, if you're going to be buying the M50 for vlogging, I know a dual card arrangement would be really useful in terms of making sure that your footage is always backed up. But ultimately it's going to mean more room, it's going to mean more processing power needed, it's going to need more battery power required, and I'm not surprised that there'll only be a single card slot in the M50 Mark II. And so I think Canon are going to be doing well to bring those additional specifications and functions to the M50 Mark II. I think it continues to differentiate itself in terms of its camera range and make sure that, you know, it's not replacing the M6 Mark II with similar features in the M50, because in essence people are going to go for the M50 Mark II as opposed to the M6 Mark II if the specifications are similar. And it's obviously reserving the higher specifications like dual card and IBIS for some of its higher spec cameras in its range. And so that seems to be quite a decent specification, certainly an upgrade from the M50 Mark I. So a 32.5 megapixel sensor, dual pixel autofocus 2, a new Digic X processor, 4K at 60 frames per second with no crop, a decent electronic viewfinder, single card slot, and other things that make that a pretty decent specification compared to its predecessors. So what are your thoughts? Do you think these additional specifications for the Mark II will put the M50 back as the vlogging camera of choice for many people? Do you think the addition of 4K at 60 frames per second without the crop really will make the difference? The 32 megapixel sensor, a great addition. Do you think that that's useful for you? Ultimately it's going to have dual pixel autofocus 2 as well. So do we think the combination of all of those additional functions will put the M50 back up on top as far as vlogging cameras are concerned? So let us have your opinion, let us have your wish list. If you have any comments, or if you'd just like to make a few comments regarding a specification perhaps that's not there, leave us a message down in the comments below. We'll be happy to respond to them, and we welcome any comments that you might have with regards to the narrative and to the content on this channel. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching. We await developments with bated breath for the Canon M50 Mark II, and we'll see you again in the next video. Bye bye.